barefoot, doesn't like cities, has strong opinions about the lumber industry. They turn into a bear and the fight ends. You know who I'm talking about. Druids. Real documented human beings who held office and got systematically wiped out by an empire that was genuinely afraid of them. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to take a trip down memory lane, the road from the real Druids to a character sheet that runs through a body of fog, a saint, a very talented forger, and a 1976 supplement nobody remembers. Let's get into it. Like I normally do, let's start with the word Druid. It comes down through Gaulish, Latin, Old Irish and Middle Welsh, and linguists reconstruct it back to Proto-Celtic Druids. That's a compound of two older words. The first is Dru, meaning oak, and because the oak was the benchmark for solid, unmoving things, that word also came to mean strong or firm. The second is Wed, meaning to see or to know. It's the same root that eventually gives English wise and wisdom. Oak knower, or the priest with a strong insight. Pliny the Elder guessed roughly the same in the 1st century, linking it to Greek dries. My favourite bit about it though is in Irish and Welsh, the same word, drew or dry, also means wren, a little brown bird everyone considered wildly prophetic. So the office sits at the intersection of tree, knowledge and reading omens out of the sky, which in itself makes a pretty cool class. But the Druids weren't a nature club. This comes from Posidonius. His Celtic ethnography is lost, but Strabo, Diodorus Siculus, Ammianus Marcellinus all copied from it, and they describe the same three-tier intellectual class: bards, musicians, keepers of tribal history, and satirists. A bard's mockery could ruin you socially, wink wink. Vates or ovits, diviners and natural philosophers, herbalists handling sacrifices and reading portents, and druids, proper moral and natural philosophers, astronomy, cosmology, theology, and supreme judges, and legal arbitrators and advisors to kings. These three branches all come from the same order, and remember that because D&D turns two of them into separate classes and forgets why they were even related. Everything we know comes from outsiders, and that's not a mistake. The Druids had a hard prohibition on writing any of it down, all oral, so our sources are Greeks and Romans, most of whom were either conquering these people or reading someone who did. The big one is Caesar, writing in the 50s BCE. In De Bello Gallico, Caesar says the training took up to 20 years, 2 decades of secret education in groves and caves, memorizing thousands of verses of cosmological lore. He also says that the tradition originated in Britain, and Gaulish Druids who wanted the top tier education sailed over to finish the degree. 20 years. Your Druid PC is 25. Historically, they're still a student. They've got a decade left. One thing that shocked me when I was making this video is the legal authority. Caesar and Strabo independently confirmed it. Exclusive jurisdiction over murder trials, inheritance disputes, and boundary conflicts, or even binding judgments. This job belonged to the Druids. They set punishments, and the ultimate sanction wasn't a fine or an execution, it was excommunication. Refuse the Druids' ruling, and this applies to kings as well, which is crazy, and you're barred from the public sacrifices, which sounds like a good thing, right? But it's not. It makes you a pariah. You're stripped of legal rights, barred from office, nobody speaks to you, nobody's gonna trade with you. You're basically socially dead while still walking around. Strabo goes further and says that they could walk between two armies already drawn up for battle and stop the fight by existing, which is crazy. Then there's the side that the Romans couldn't shut up about. Caesar describes victims burned alive inside enormous woven willow figures. That's where the Wicker Man comes from, by the way. Strabo and Diodorus describe a divination method where a consecrated victim is stabbed above the diaphragm, and the priests read the future in how he convulses, how he falls, how the blood comes out, which is pretty freaky. Propaganda? Partly, but, well, probably. Very convenient thing to say about people you're invading, right? But in 1984, the ground gave up something that complicates the skeptical read, and Pliny kind of backs it up. The white-robed priests climbed the oak on the 6th day of a waxing moon, cutting mistletoe with a golden sickle, catching it in a white cloak, sacrificing 2 white bulls whose horns have never been bound. The mistletoe brewed into a cure-all, an antidote to every poison basically, which is beautiful, I guess, in a sense, but also nonsense. Gold is far too soft to cut wood. It was symbolic, or a gilded bronze tool, but the golden sickle stuck because it's a great image. And I think that's the pattern that I've come across throughout this whole video, is that the good image beats the true one every time. Rome understood exactly what Druids were, not priests, but an infrastructure or organization outlawed under Tiberius, again under Claudius. Then in 60 or 61 CE, Suetonius Paulinus launched an ambitious assault on Mona, Anglesey, the heart of British Druidic learning. Tacitus describes the Druids lined on the shore, hands raised, screaming curses, and Roman soldiers freezing in genuine terror. Then the legions rallied and killed them, cut the sacred groves, and that was the continental tradition done. I think the biggest takeaway from this section for me is that we should stop just doing Druid circles, you know, nature lovers in a clearing, and write them as a sovereign court, a non-state judicial body with recognized jurisdiction over the borders between three warring baronies. Your players don't seek them out for a hook, they're going to these people because they need a ruling, and give Druid PCs excommunication as a ritual the cost. Mark a corrupt noble with a spiritual exile, and mechanically they get no divine healing, no sanctuary, and narratively, and this is the good part for me, NPCs won't look at them, won't sell to them, won't share a road. This is like building up for like a good antagonist, you know, and also makes your PCs feel like the world has like a cost to it. Next up, we have sacrifices. For centuries, the argument about Druidic human sacrifice was a stalemate. The Roman sources says it happened, but the Roman sources were also written by people who actively were conquering the Celts, so of course they would say that. There's no real physical evidence either way, so pick whatever version suits you in your game best. But in the summer of 1984, that changed. Lindow Moss is a commercial peat bog in Cheshire. Peat gets cut, dumped onto a conveyor, and fed through a shredding machine. And then on the 1st of August, a worker on that line looked down and saw a human foot going past. They stopped the machine, and what they pulled out was a man, and the joke on the site was to call him Pete Marsh because he came out of the Pete Marsh original. Science calls him Lindow 2, everyone else calls him Lindow Man, and here's why he matters to this conversation. He's not just old, he's the best preserved ancient body found in Britain, ever. Which means for the first time we can look at how one of these people actually died, in detail, without a Roman telling us what to think about it. The preservation is down to chemistry. A sphagnum bog stays wet all year, holds almost no oxygen and sits under 4 degrees and runs acidic, around pH 3.4 to 4.5. As the moss decays, it releases sugars and humic acids that effectively tan human tissue the same way you'd tan liver. So we don't get just bones, we get skin, hair, muscle, and the contents of his stomach 2,000 years later, which is crazy. So who was he? A man in his mid-20s, somewhere between 5'6" and 5'8", and around 135 pounds. Physically, he was in excellent shape. A bit of an early arthritis and a mild intestinal parasite he almost certainly never knew he had, but his hands were smooth, he had no calluses, nails neatly trimmed. This is a man who hadn't done a day's worth of manual labour in his life. His hair, moustache and beard were all cut short, and under an electron microscope, the follicles are stepped, which is a signature of haircut, using scissors or shears, and cut only shortly before he died, in the late Iron Age Britain. So shears weren't really something a farmhand owns, that's like a prestige object. Whoever this was, he was somebody, which makes what happened to him a great deal stranger, because he wasn't simply killed, he was killed carefully, methodically, and in a very specific order, and that order is the entire argument scholars call the triple death. 1. 2 blows to the top of the skull with a blunt V-shaped implement, possibly a small bronze axe, fractured the skull, drove a splinter of bone into the brain. CT scans found swelling around the wound. He was alive, unconscious, unfortunately for several hours after. The second is a sinew cord, 1.5mm thick, knotted 3 times, wrapped tight around his neck, strangled him, broke 2 vertebrae doing it. And then the third is a deep cut across the right side of his throat, severing the jugular, draining him completely, then face down in a bog pool. His last last meal was an unseasoned griddle cake, charred barley and wheat bran. Poor food for a man with a manicured hand, you know. But do you know what was mixed into it? Mistletoe pollen. The plant Pliny said they revered above all others, the one that stays green in the winter while the oak is looking dead that it's clinging to. So take from that what you will. Then the romantic reading comes from Anne Ross and Don Robbins in The Life and Death of a Druid Prince. They named Lavernios, which might be wrong, so please don't judge me, which also means little fox after a fox fur armband found on his otherwise naked body, and argued he was an elite, possibly a druid, sacrificed at Beltane around 60 CE, a voluntary offering to Teutates, Esus, and Tyrannus. At the exact moment Rome was slaughtering the Druids on Anglesey and crushing Boudica, which kind of makes the griddle cake feel like a sacrificial lottery. You draw the scorched piece and you're the devoted one. Ronald Hutton, who is the historian to read on this, his objection is simple. The radiocarbon range spans about 900 years, with the best estimate between 2 BC and 119 AD. That's the Roman period, when human sacrifice was flatly illegal. Hutton's alternative is boring and hard to argue with. Executed criminal, robbery victim, or political killing under occupation. Robert Connolly separately noted some of the trauma could be post-mortem caused by bloating and 2 millennia of peat pressing down, so we don't know. We have a well-groomed young man with mistletoe in his gut who died 3 times, and 2 incredible readings leading to completely different worlds. As a GM, that ambiguity is worth more than the answer for me, to be honest with you. It just fills me with so many ideas about running the triple death as a ritual your players have to choose. Like a cataclysm is coming, the ward that stops it needs a high status volunteer and 3 casters. 1 delivers the blunt force, 1 binds, entangle, thorn whip, and 1 cuts and catches the blood in a sacred vessel. That's the first thing that comes to my head anyways. But I know there's like the idea that nature magic is kind of clean, but nature isn't clean. It's like a compost heap that looks nice from a distance, you know? Next up is the saints and the sorcerers. Continental Druidry is dead, but Rome never took Ireland, so there the Druids got rewritten twice by 2 different groups. The second rewrite is the one that turns them into wizards. The first is a dismantling. When Ireland converts to Christianity, the church takes over the one job that was unambiguously religious, the sacrifices, the rites, the talking to gods. That was only ever part of what a druid did. The rest of it, the lore, the history, the poetry, the training princes, the church had no interest in and no replacement for. So the order gets broken into pieces and each piece keeps working under a new name. We know this because of the Irish law tracts, written legal text from the 7th and 8th centuries that list every profession in the country, and exactly how much each one is worth, and in those lists you can see the old order sitting there in 3 parts. The Philid, court poets and keepers of traditional law, the Senchadi, the historians, and the Brithmain, better known as the Brean. Again, sorry if I'm butchering any of these names. The Breans were the judges, the ones that were interpreting Irish customary law centuries after the groves came down. So basically what I took from this was that the authority survives, but the name doesn't. By the time those texts are written, the remaining pagan Drew has been demoted to the legal rank of commoner and reclassified as a minor sorcerer. Everything respectable went to the Christianized poets. Everything that was spooky kept the name. And the feeling that I took from this was that was when the pivot went from the word druid meaning judge and it started meaning something like weird magic. In the mythology, they go the other way though. The Ulster cycle gives us Cathbad, chief advisor to Concobar, Macnessa, traveling with 100 students. He's teaching law, magic, astrology, and military science. And something that I found pretty interesting was that there was no one that could speak before the king in Ulster, and the king was forbidden to speak before Cathbad had spoken. Cathbad reads clouds and casts sticks for auspicious days and hands out prophecies that always land. He's the one who tells Cuchulainn he'll have eternal glory and a short life, and tells Deirdre that her beauty will end Concobar's kingdom. And then there comes the second rewrite, which is the one that D&D actually inherited and doesn't come from the Druids at all. It comes from the people who replaced them. In 7th century, Irish monks started writing saints' lives, hagiographies, and these aren't biographies, they're like propaganda with a halo on it. Basically, the job is to prove you're a saint was the real thing, and the easiest way to do that is to put him up against the strongest opponent you can imagine and have him win. So around 2 centuries after Patrick's death, 2 monks sit down to write the life of St. Patrick, and to make Patrick look enormous, they actually need enemies worth beating. They pick the Druids. And the scene they build is that Patrick arrives at the Hill of Tara, the seat of the High King, on Easter Sunday in the year of 433. They pick this date on purpose because it collides with Beltane, the pagan fire festival, where no fire in the land may be lit before the kings. Patrick lights one anyways, and the king's court Druids step forwards to deal with him. What follows is a straight magical duel in 3 rounds. The first round is an ordeal of snow. The chief Druid chants, calls down the powers of the frozen north, and buries the entire plain of Tara in deep snow. Patrick's response is not to counter it, he just tells the Druid to put it back, and the Druid can't. And the reason he gives is that his magic only works in one direction. It curses, it can conjure, it blights, but it can't undo. Patrick makes the sign of the cross and the snow vanishes instantly. The second round is the ordeal of darkness. The Druid tries the same move but with different weather, black fog, howling winds, and the sun dimmed, the earth shaking, and once again having summoned it, he has no way to lift it. Patrick prays and the light comes back. The third round is the ordeal of fire. This one is the tiebreaker and it's rigged. They build a single house, half of it green wood, half of it dry. Dry wood burns, green wood doesn't. Then they swap cloaks. The Druid goes into the green half wearing Patrick's cloak, and Patrick's young disciple Bennen goes into the dry half wearing the Druid's cloak. They then set it on fire, and the fire ignores the wood completely. It burns what it should have been protected from and spares what it should have destroyed. The Druid burns to ash in the green half, but Patrick's cloak on his shoulder comes out untouched. Bennen walks out of the dry half unharmed, and the Druid's cloak on his shoulders is ash. I think the message here is clear that the wood isn't relevant. The only thing that decided who lived in that house was the cloak you were wearing. To be fair, it's a pretty cool boss fight that they wrote in the 7th century, and it had a specific job. It was being written during a power struggle between the northern and southern Irish churches, making the case for the supremacy of Armagh. They needed Ireland's conversion to read as a clean, miraculous victory. The historical Patrick's own confession survives. There wasn't any duels or blizzards, just a foreigner in a hostile land, robbed, in constant danger, doing slow, unglamorous work over decades. Nobody makes fan art of slow cultural work. And there's some great asymmetry there, I think, that we can use for ourselves, like making Druid magic excellent at destruction, but terrible at restoration. Blizzards, blight, darkness, rot, curses, all easy things to do. Healing, lifting a blight, undoing your own curse is more than just like a spell slot. It's like a transaction, a ritual with a cost and an exchange, like a sacrifice or something. And run the Cathbad rule at court. The party petitions the king doesn't reply and cannot speak until the Druid speaks first. They negotiate with the advisor while the man on the throne stares at them in silence. And then we move on. By the 16th century, the Druids have been gone for 1,000 years, and what survives is about 10 pages of hostile Greek and Roman descriptions. Then the printing press made those 10 pages available to everyone at once, and people started filling in the gaps. John Aubrey, then William Stuckley, look at Stonehenge and Avebury and decided these must be Druid temples. Stuckley publishes Stonehenge, a temple restored to the British Druids in 1740, adopts the pen name Sindonux, an imagined archdruid, and reads the whole thing biblically, arguing the Druids preserved a pure belief in one god handed down from Noah. Stonehenge is Neolithic and Bronze Age. It predates the Iron Age Celts by millennia. Stuckley was wrong by an amount that's hard to overstate, to be honest with you. Did it matter? not really. Druids in stone circles are welded together forever, but it's like I said earlier, a good image beats the true one every time. In 1781, the ancient order of Druids is founded in a London pub, essentially Freemasonry with better branding. And then my favourite person in this video, Edward Williams, Welsh stonemason, poet, nationalist, and laudanum enthusiast, goes under the pen name of Iolo Morganwg, and in the late 1700s, Iolo announced that he had found something: ancient Welsh manuscripts, passed down in secret, preserving the genuine teachings of the original Druids, the whole system intact, hidden in Wales the entire time. He hadn't actually found anything, he just wrote it himself. And not a document, a library, thousands of pages of invented history, philosophy, and ritual, much of it later collected in a volume called the Bardas. He wrote it so well and kept it so internally consistent that scholars accepted it as genuine for more than 100 years. Here's what one man in laudanum Hayes invented, all of which people now think is Iron Age: the Gorsedd, a ceremonial assembly of bards which Iolo staged for the first time in 1792 on Primrose Hill in London, complete with a stone circle, robes, and full ranking system he made up on the spot. In 1819, he got absorbed into the Eisteddfod, the Welsh National Cultural Festival, and it still performs there today, an invented ceremony now a genuine national tradition. The three colour coded ranks: the bards wear blue, ovates wear green, druids wear white. If you have ever pictured a druid in white robes, and you have, everyone has, that isn't Pliny, that's Iolo. The Arwen, a symbol of three straight lines fanning out from a point like a light coming through a gap, standing for love, justice, and truth. The Colbrin, an entire alphabet invented from nothing, presented as an ancient bardic script designed for carving onto wood staves. I don't think Iolo was a con man in the way that the word normally would make him sound. He was trying to build a national identity for a colonized country using the only source material available, which was none, but he forced the past because someone had already taken the real one. But here's the part that I think really matters for us, is that because his forgeries were so convincing, the Druid revival groups that came afterwards adopted them wholesale as history and not fiction. Iolo invented structures became the actual working framework for modern Druidry. You can watch it happen. In 1964, Ross Nichols broke away from the ancient Druid order and founded the Order of Bards, Ovates and Druids, named directly after Iolo's three ranks, and combined that structure with Gardnerian Wicca, the modern witchcraft revival, plus Jungian psychology and Robert Graves' theory that the Celts kept a calendar based on trees. Nichols and Jared Gardner together settled the Wheel of the Year, 8 festivals, 4 solar and 4 Celtic fire festivals. Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, and Lunasa. Over in America, Isaac Bonewitz founded Our Own Druidry in 1984 out of a group that had originally formed as a student protest against compulsory chapel, and pushed it towards genuinely rigorous reconstruction. So the Druid you picture, white robe, stone circle, Wheel of the Year, 3 ranks, mystic symbol, did not survive from the Iron Age. It was built in the 18th century, largely by a Welshman, and finished off in the 20th. And that is the Druid that walked into a game shop in the 70s. And I really like the idea of like giving your Druids Colbrin. They don't write things down on a piece of parchment. That's like the wizard's thing, and it breaks the whole oral prohibition we opened the video with. Instead, they carry a pouch of carved oak and rowan staves, and cast them onto the earth to divine, or to leave a message only another Druid can read. And use the tri-colour hierarchy. In any Druid sanctuary your party visits, you could have like blue robes that gather rumour and lore, green robes are the doctors and the seers, and white robes are the high justices, and their word is the law. Your players work out who they need to talk to within one session, and the order reads as like an organisation rather than just sort of like running off vibes. And now we need to get into the 50 years of dice. The Druid first appears in Supplement 1, Greyhawk, 1975. Not as something you play, but as an NPC, a priest of neutral religions guarding wild domains. In 1976, Dennis Sustad writes it up as a playable class for Eldritch Wizardry, drawing on the early English history and Irish legend, built around plants and animals locked behind the hard, true, neutral requirement. To be a druid, you had to be true neutral, not good or evil or lawful or even chaotic. And if your character drifted off that spot, you started losing your class abilities. Now that looks like an arbitrary bit of 70s rules lawyering, but look at what it's actually trying to do. Dennis is reaching for the thing Strabo described: the arbitrator who belongs to no side, the one figure who can walk between two armies precisely because he isn't on either team. And I think that's a good instinct about what a druid is. The trouble is he expressed it as an alignment requirement, and an alignment requirement is a rule about two words written in a box on your sheet. It doesn't give the druid any authority or any jurisdiction or even a reason for the world to care about like them being neutral. It just tells the players what they're not allowed to be, which doesn't really fly. So when later editions dropped the restriction, and they did, because policing a player's alignment is miserable, nothing replaced it, they decided to remove the rule, and the idea it was gesturing at, that the druid as an impartial judge standing between warring powers, went with it out the window and it never came back. AD&D 1st and 2nd made the druid a subclass of cleric, and it had the strangest political rules any class has ever had, capped at 13th level with a fixed number of high level druids allowed to exist in the world. You had to find a sitting high level druid and beat them in a single magical combat, which again is pretty cool when you're saying it. Advancement by dueling the incumbent. That's the AD&D designers accidentally recreating a hierarchical order with limited seats, much closer to the historical thing than anything since. And everyone agreed it was annoying and removed it. They also couldn't wear metal armor. 3rd edition made it a standalone core class with an animal companion and wild shape that you get at level 5, locking in the shapeshifting nature wizard archetype permanently. 4th edition did something big, and it reclassified the druid under the primal power source and cut the class loose from religion entirely. So they went from being priests to just conduits for the world sustaining primal spirits. The first time in D&D's history the druid wasn't defined by worship. Wild shape became a fast combat mode, minor action in and out. And then in 5th edition 2014, they gave us wild shape at level 2 and split the class between Circle of Land, Spells and Biomes, and Circle of Moon, punching things as a bear. The metal armor taboo survived as the famously weird line about not wearing armor or shields made of metal, and that split spellcaster or shapeshifter is a 50-year-old argument that class never resolved. Every edition picks a lane and feels bad about it. And then 2024 edition addressed it head on. At level 1 you pick a primal order, warden, martial weapons, medium armor, frontline defender, and the 2024 rules just dropped the metal taboo, which is correct because it was never historically supported. Pliny explicitly has them working with gold, magician, an extra cantrip, and you add your wisdom modifier to intelligence based arcana and nature checks. The historical druid as elite natural philosopher finally in a stat block, and then the wild shape gets rebuilt from the floor up. 2014 separate hit point pool is abolished. Wild shape is now a bonus action for everyone, and you keep your own HP and gain flat temporary hit points. Your class level for a base druid, 3 times your level for a Circle of the Moon. And you don't revert when they run out, you stay a bear until your actual HP hits 0 and you're incapacitated, or you choose to drop it. You can also speak normally in beast form. Known shapes list starts at 4, swappable on a long rest. Level 5 you get Wild Resurgence, trade spell slots for wild shape uses. At level 7 you get Elemental Fury, picks potent spell casting or primal strike. It's come a long way, and the class is good in my opinion to a degree. I don't think D&D misunderstood what the druid was. It just selectively amplified one true thing, that they venerated sacred groves and made that single attribute the entire class. And the parts we lost were frankly more playable. In my opinion, they were the establishment, the courtly power brokers, supreme justices, educators of children of kings, astronomers, people who could stop a war by walking in the middle of it, which is like so cool. We took the most politically embedded profession in the Iron Age and made them the guy who doesn't like cities. So 5 things I think we should give back. The first is the jurist. The real power wasn't their magic, it was law, customary law, the tradition that survives in Ireland. Build a druid who leans on Zone of Truth, Geash and Command as core class spell slots, and let them spend wild shape on a Mark of Arbiter instead of a bear. like an aura where nothing within 30 feet can knowingly lie or draw a weapon without losing a contested wisdom check or something. The second is the Watcher in the Court. Druids advise kings and shape treaties, so we should stop using wild shape purely as a tanking button. A hunting hound or a court raven or even a barn owl in the rafters. Your druid sits in the room while a conspiracy assembles itself, and nobody thinks twice because they're always a dog. And because 2024 lets you talk in beast form, they can report live without breaking cover. Give them bonuses to persuasion, deception, and insight while transformed. Understanding people is the whole job. The third is Memory Keeper. 20 years of oral training, thousands of memorized verses, astronomy, cosmology, the transmigration of the soul, and nothing in any edition reflects it. So a druid's memory cannot be magically altered or erased, full stop, no save, and give them something like double proficiency on any history check touching regional lineages, ancient treaties, or planar astronomy. Your druid is now the party's living archive and immune to the mind flayer's favorite trick. The fourth is to put the order back together. At level 3, instead of a biome, pick your branch circle of Bard, lore and inspiration, satire that damages standing, circle of the Ovate, herbalism, healing, divination, circle of the Druid, moral philosophy, lore, ritual. 3 roads that are all part of the same order or organization with one training tradition. The fifth is the sacred soil, not generic nature. Circle of the Land's biome shouldn't be spell lists, they should be jurisdictions, territories held under ancient treaty on their sworn ground. A druid gets a bump to a spell save DC and can't be tracked by non-magical means. Not because they're nature's favorite, but because the land itself is theirs by law. And take all of this with a pinch of salt. This video for me was really about like digging into the history of druids and giving you, the viewers, inspiration to come up with new ideas for your characters or NPCs. A lot of the time these videos are just like me thinking out loud pretty much after I've just been reading a lot of stuff. But if you like the video about classes and want me to do like wizard, sorcerer, fighter, barbarian, then let me know in the comments. And if you have any experience with any of the things that I've mentioned about druids that you've implemented in your games, then let us know in the comments, because other people will find it interesting and useful. And let's get debating. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay spicy, adventurers.